Good morning.
Morning. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Terrific. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm glad to be here again, joining you for another episode of Finding Your New Normal.
Another episode. I like the way that sounds.
Another episode. And I'm excited to talk with you today about shifting focus, finding that changing your perspective on tradition.
Mm,
So, you and I have talked a little bit about the fact that I'll be welcoming home my adult college daughter next week,
right.
and that brings some changes in tradition
Mhm.
and kind of has had forced me to change perspective on what the holidays look like. So that's what we get to talk about and share today on changing perspective and our traditions.
Good. So let's set ourselves up for a restful, peaceful, clearing conversation with a little bit of guided meditation. Is that okay?
I love that.
Okay, great. So today let's focus on shifting perspective and shifting and focusing attention in other directions, like you're talking about. So you would close your eyes, take a deep breath, find that peaceful place, try and block out all the noises. There are things that are going on around you right now that are distracting and pulling your attention. Try and look at your mind through your mind's eye. Good look at the colors that are raining down from the top of your head, through your brain, down your shoulders, down your arms, tip of your fingertips. Touch your fingertips one by one, thumb to pointer finger, thumb to middle finger, thumb to ring finger, thumb to pinky finger. Focus your attention on your hands. Now shake your hands. How does that feel? Think about how that feels. Feel the energy coming to your finger all the way to your hands, to your fingertips. Now pull your attention back to your center, back to that breathing, back to your heartbeat. Focus your attention on that peaceful place where you're in control and your breathing is easy, your heart rate's regular. You're taking nice deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. One more time, deep in your center, in through your nose and out through your mouth. Then when you're ready, come back into awareness, focusing on how you can shift your attention, even in the most distracting situations. That was less than 2 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, and it
Really?
takes you from that place of total distraction with the dog barking in the background. And in the beginning, I watched your whole body stiffen. We started the guided meditation, and all of a sudden you're stiff because it's crazy. Life is
Yep.
crazy. Things are happening. Did you feel that sinking more deeply in?
I did. It was wonderful.
Yeah, so it's a
And that's what,
gift
oh,
we
go
give
ahead.
ourselves to shift our attention from those things that are making you crazy and stressed out. Just think about something else. Sometimes easier said than done, but taking that moment, focusing on your breath, focusing on centering your attention and directing it exactly where you want it to go, or away
Mhm.
from what's distracting you or making you nuts.
Well, and one of the things that I think is great also is while I was doing that, yes, it was distracting because there's the puppy barking and all these other things,
Right?
is I focused also in part on focusing the energy in the house.
Ah, what a great suggestion.
So it was really cool because I thought he's going to feel it energetically.
Mm,
And so if as I'm grounding myself, I was grounding the entire environment.
right.
And just noticing then the calming that was coming about on a whole house level.
Yeah.
As opposed to
that's a really cool thing to think of, to talk about too, because we can shift by shifting our energy and shifting our focus and our attention and intention. We really move what's going on around us, which is a very cool thing, especially when we're talking about moving from one tradition to the next, moving from what feels normal to what doesn't feel so normal, and making that feel more comfortable.
Exactly. And I was thinking about that as well, is that oftentimes if we start to internalize the stress that we're going to disappoint somebody or ourselves because traditions are changing, that they're looking to us to reground and say, it's a new normal.
Right.
It's okay.
Yeah. What kind of things are you looking at doing to establish your new normal? This is your second holiday season post-accident, right?
Post-accident, second holiday season post-accident. And one of the things that it's already started is just texting conversation with my daughter that's away and the daughter that's here, saying, what is most important to you? What feels like Christmas and New Year's to you?
Right.
And then double checking with myself and saying, is that something that I can still give? Is that something that I can work in? And are there things that they're letting go of that are important to me? I think is interesting too.
Yeah. Give an example of that. Give an example of something that might be important to you that other people just might let go.
I think one of the biggies, let me think on that for a second, because there were some that they said, oh, I definitely want this. One of the biggies for me, actually, and this has been not with my children, but with my husband, is I used to really do a lot of decorating. And I haven't done a ton of decorating this year. I find that the busyness of all that stuff is a little too much for me.
Yeah.
And so I'm watching my husband drop subtle hints. So I got the boxes down from the attic.
Right.
So, I see you got the wreath. It's nice that you're decorating. And I'm noticing it's important to him. So we're going to have that conversation, because I just had that reality check yesterday morning of, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, because there are things that are going on outside of us and our children. We don't think about what's important. And I think that's so, when you're creating a new normal, when there are things that shift and things, like after post-brain injury, great example, post-sickness, post-child leaving home and re-entering, all of those changes that change how we look at things, I think it's really important to check in with people and say, what's important to you? And then juggle it. Because all of the decorating may be important to your husband, but it may not fit in your life. But if you don't have that conversation, somebody's going to resent something.
Or they're going to resent it. They're going to harbor disappointment. They're going to question.
Disappointment. That's beautiful. Harbor disappointment. Something to keep right in the front of our minds, isn't it? Yeah.
And I think it's interesting, because I do think that then that shadows the entirety of the season. Whatever that season looks like for anybody.
Right.
And whether it's, I'm struggling right now. There's a musical Santa that my mother gave my daughters when I think the older one was 3, so the younger one was a newborn. And he dances, and he hasn't come out this year. And it's the first year he hasn't been out since 19 years or whatever it is now. And I've been checking in on myself saying, well, why isn't he out? Why isn't he out? And struggling, because I really just don't want him out this year.
Yeah, right.
But also struggling with the changing my perspective. I don't have small children in the house, and he's not going anywhere. He will be saved for grandchildren at some point, I would imagine. But it's interesting for me because I think that when we change perspective, when we start to shift transit or traditions, it's also a shift in where we are in the world. That I don't have small children anymore. That was a part of it.
It's what you talk about so well, Mary. It's the transitions. It's the moving from one phase of your life to another, or moving from one event to another. It's those endings that are not necessarily finish lines. They're transitions to something else.
Yeah.
So that ending of holding back on putting that one thing out that really is symbolic of having small children in your house. If you look at things in those terms, what does this one mean to me? What does this symbolize? Why is this so important? We don't ask those why questions enough, do we?
I don't think we do, because I think that sometimes the answers create fear. That if we really go and look at it, does that make sense?
Explain it a little bit more. Explain what you mean by that.
I think that sometimes we're afraid of the answer. I think that it can create a whole different series of why questions.
Right.
Why didn't I put that Santa out?
Right.
And the why, the first answer is because I really don't want to listen to him singing Rocket Around or Jingle Bell Rock or whatever it is that he sings. There's a certain volume of noise in the house with a dog with dementia and then a puppy that is already more than I like. To add noise on top of it is not something that's appealing to me, because that, as you and I have talked, is something that since the brain injury is difficult. The other part of it is then you have to go deeper. Why? I don't want the extra noise, but why? It's also representative of the fact that I don't have small children. And then that brings, even I get emotional a little bit right now, that brings the end of a season.
Yeah, right. Right.
And
here's another interesting twist on that. So you're asking all the people in your family what's important to you. What happens if somebody comes back and says, hey, this Santa's really important to me? Do you ask them why?
Oh, that's a really good point. I probably wouldn't. I probably would just put it out and just accept it as face value, but I think it's important to teach that asking why.
Well, and I think it's important to teach ourselves the asking why, because we're moms. Our children say something, we comply. If it's reasonable, if it makes them happy, if it doesn't hurt anybody else, just do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So maybe asking those questions is a good idea. Maybe that's a good way to establish a new joint normal. And maybe part of that new normal is taking everybody's feelings into account and asking why. Sometimes a tradition is just a tradition because you've always done it. Always been that way. Why should we change it now? Life's working. Why should we rock the boat? But it's not necessarily rocking the boat. It's finding out what's important to you and why it's important to you and coming to consensus on that whole issue.
That's a really good point. One of the things that my mom had said, and it was interesting, is she talked about whatever you start when they're young, they will continue to expect when they're older.
Yeah.
Because that will symbolize whatever it is. Now, given that she had 9 kids, that was an awful lot of pleasing that she went through.
Really? I can't imagine. I can't imagine being a pleaser and having 9 children. My head would explode. How do you do that?
That woman was a saint. I mean, when she talked about, you talk about traditions, when she talked about shopping She
Uh-huh.
said she couldn't shop for 9 children at a time. She made 9 individual shopping trips for Christmas because she could only focus on one at a time.
Wow. Wow.
Like she hit it. But then she said also as we grew older and she was ready to shift her own perspective,
Uh-huh.
that any one of the 9 of us who had been long out could come in and say, well, but where's the Santa with the bell? Or why didn't you put up the old mail holder or the whatever? She said there was always something different for each of you. And she finally had to get to the point where she said, this is what Christmas is for me now.
Mm.
Because it was her transitioning home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Did
so
you see that at the time, or is this just something that, are these things that we notice in hindsight?
a little bit of both. Actually, she and I talked about it, and it was interesting because out of the 9, I was the last one at home. And she would tell this funny story because being the last one of 9 at home, I was there when she went through the bulk of the transition and she started to give away many of the Christmas decorations and things like that. And the year that she decided that she wasn't going to put up a Christmas tree. And I kept saying, but mom. And she was, nope. And I really thought she was going to flip on a dime. So Christmas Eve, I went out and I bought it was like a 4-foot Christmas tree. It was such a Charlie Brown Christmas tree on the lot.
Right.
And I strapped it to the top of my little Chevy Nova and drove home, and I drug it up to the porch and I said, it'll be gone before tomorrow evening.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, we just have to have a Christmas tree when I come down in the morning. And it was such a juxtaposition between her shifting traditions and my holding on to a tradition, that was, I think, such a formative moment to watch and really observe a woman who had raised a family and who was in transition. So I think that's one of the challenges, whether it's post-brain injury or just a time in our life, that being in that place where you can say, I need to shift perspective here. And how do my traditions play into that?
Yeah, there are moments too when you perspective. There are times when you can feel the energy in the room change, and you can feel that whole dynamic change, and you can shift that by shifting your attention, your focus, and your energy. So, we can radiate what we want the rest of the room to feel. For example, if you've got a shift, if you feel that all of a sudden there's a judgmental shift in the room, and we can feel those shifts. We can feel when someone walks in the room and someone else feels like they've looked them up and down, or you look to see, or someone in the room looks to see what they're carrying when they walk in the door. All those judgmental things that do come in, especially at this time of year, we can make a conscious effort and shift our energy and shift our perspective. If you radiate a little bit more joy, you radiate a little bit more happiness, you're going to shift the energy in the room. It's a very cool thing to experiment with. It's so cool to play with. What happens when I shift not just my attention, but my intention? What's my purpose in this room? My purpose is to spread joy. I'm going to radiate joy today. That's what I'm going to do. That's my intention.
And I think joy is contagious.
Mm-hmm.
And even if the other person or people in the room don't catch it,
right?
It's something that will spread within yourself, which I love.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we carry it to the grocery store. We carry it to the post office. We carry it on a walk on the street. We carry it on a phone call, in our voices. You can,
when we get in the car to commute.
Exactly.
Right.
All of those things. So how do you, yeah, when I have a need to shift and focus attention, I focus on my breath and I focus on what I say to myself on that exhale. So last week, when our wonderful friend Kathy was here, she gave us a great suggestion, and she said that she says to herself, I am enough. So I tried that this week. You know, there was a moment where I was in a situation where I felt really uncomfortable and out of my element and way stinking over my head. Took a deep breath in, focused on the breath coming, you know, held it at the top, felt that energy radiating out. And then as I breathed out, I repeated, I am enough, I am enough, I am enough. And bam, shifted my attention. And it shifted how I saw myself and how I presented myself to the rest of the world. So it's hard to get things done and to make, you know, that impact that we want to make if we don't shift how we feel about ourselves. We're windows, you know, for other people. So
I so agree with you. And I do think that that is such a great practice, especially, again, this time of year can get chaotic. We can get concerned about, am I disappointing somebody because I can't do the crazy lights, or I can't do the loud whatever anymore, or I can't. And especially as moms or any kind of caregiver, you worry about, am I letting them down?
Right.
I like what you're doing this year. You're making a big change in tradition this year to help yourself also.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I made a decision not to fit in anybody else's plans this year. I made a decision to keep my family unit together. The only way I was going to do that, my son lives less than 5 miles from me right now, which I thought would be the most amazing thing you could possibly imagine. Oh my gosh, I finally live in the same town as my son. He went away to college. He was miles and miles away. After he graduated from college, he went to New Zealand and to India, worlds and worlds away. And then he came and settled someplace, and we decided this is a good reason to stay here. So what happens, though, is that he doesn't come home for holidays. He comes over for a meal. He and his phenomenal dog come over for, you know, to say hello. They come over to visit. They don't come and sleep at my house anymore. We don't sleep under the same roof. So I thought, okay, so how do we shift that? How do we switch that? You know, I realized I'm missing that. I'm missing that connection. When we used to live in Colorado, near you, and we built a house in the mountains. When we were building that house, we lived in what I call the double wide tough shed. So we all were in this little tiny place, and it was some of the coolest times we've ever had. And I think part of that is because of that closeness. Not only did we not sleep in the same house, you know, not only were we sleeping in the same house, but we were right on top of each other. And we had to figure out, we had to be so in tune with each other so we didn't step on other people. All I wanted this year was just to regain a little bit of that. So I decided to find something we all love so there wouldn't be so much resistance. We all love hiking and we all love experiences. So we found a place in Joshua Tree, which is not too far from where we live right now. Joshua Tree is one of my favorite places on earth, because you've been to Joshua Tree?
I have not.
Oh my gosh, you need to go. The rocks, every time you turn the corner, there's a new landscape. The boulders are round and smooth and like nothing I've ever seen before in one area. And then you have these majestic peaks and, you know, jutting cliffs and all kinds of crazy stuff around every turn. Things change. It's also a very deeply spiritual place, which is really important to all of my huge little family of 3 right now. But it's very important for us to go someplace. 4, excuse me, I can't forget Bubs. Bubs
exactly.
And what?
I said exactly.
Yeah. And so we need to, I needed to figure out a place where we could do something we love, which is hike, be with nature, find that deep spirituality. My husband then found a place that does sound therapy. So we're going to go in the day before Christmas Eve. We're going to do this big group sound therapy place, is world renowned connection with the earth kind of place. And then we'll just spend time together. So yeah, that's a big shift, and we're all going to be making big shifts. Therefore, we didn't really decorate. We didn't get a Christmas tree. And there's been talk around me, and I was raised Jewish. My husband was raised Catholic. If it has food, presents, and family, we celebrate it. That's our only criteria. You have to have, you have to have fun. If there's a party, we are all over it. So, I think we made big shifts in how we grew up, to how we work together and how we grow together. I think this is the next step in how we grow. I've heard grumblings of, there'll be a tree here. I don't see anything happening. We'll see what happens. It's all a matter of perspective, right? And focus.
It's perspective. I was sitting here thinking also about, well, why do we have traditions? What's the importance of traditions? And I think traditions tie us together. I've always said, I use the metaphor that they're the thread that weaves our fabric together. And that's how we have shared common experiences, whatever they are. And they ground us and they root us. And sometimes we're afraid that if we change those traditions, we'll somehow be ungrounded. We will lose the sense of maybe who we are, where we came from. But listening to you talk about Joshua Tree, the beautiful thing is I'm thinking, and you're starting a new patch in the quilt.
Yes. Yes.
Not throwing out the old, it's a new patch.
Yes. And I think the other thing, the image that I just got when you were talking about how everything weaves together, are the laces on your shoes. Or the laces on your hiking boots. That's even a better one, because they come up a little bit on your ankle. You tie them tightly. The traditions tie us in tightly and keep us safe and comfortable and keep us from tipping over. So how do we just change the laces just a little bit? So we're not changing the holiday. We're not changing our family. We're not changing the fact that we're honoring tradition. We're just looking at it through a whole different lens. We're still stable.
We're still stable. And sometimes those laces on a boot get broken. And I don't know about you, but I don't always have replacement laces, so I've tied them together.
Right.
And you tie on a new part.
Right.
And you move forward.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think that's the beautiful way to look at it, is that it's not, you haven't thrown out the boots, you haven't thrown out the laces, you haven't thrown out the fabric that weaves who you are as a family.
Yes, we're bringing the food that's traditional. We were talking about this last night. We're bringing a cooler. We're just going to bring everything and cook it there. There's no reason that we need to give anything that's meaningful to anybody up. And you now inspired me this weekend, because we're celebrating Hanukkah, so I'll do latkes. We haven't decided whether it's Friday or Saturday night, but that's one of the things that, food's big in our house, so latkes are important. And when we get together, I'm going to ask what's important. What do you really want us to bring with? Bubs will say raw hides and pepperoni. But,
seems reasonable.
Yes. And he'll say, leave those antlers at home, please. The reindeer antlers. But they will not stay home.
I think it's perfect. And it's again, the dialogue that I've started with my girls. And I think it's a way to make sure that everybody is getting their own needs met. And that's what binds a family.
Yes. And that's what closes 30 minutes.
It does. Boom.
Thank you, my dear friend.
Thank you, my dear friend. This was fun, as always.
Yes.
Blessings.
Have
All right, we'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.